What was the most chilling and inconceivable thing a parent has ever done to you? My husband and I got married in 2002 and had our son Brian 10 months later. In May 2004, we welcomed our twin daughters, Mary and Lisa. My family was beautiful. Every time we took a picture of us, we looked like a family from those photos you can find on Google. However, I can't look at the pictures of us anymore because they make me feel sick to my stomach. When my twin daughters were born, we had no problems at the hospital. They were born exactly on the due date and passed all the postnatal exams with excellent statistics. But when we got home, we noticed that Mary was developing a rash. I had not dealt much with allergies in children since my son did not have any, and no child or adult in my family was allergic to anything, so I did not know what it was. I thought maybe she just had sensitive skin like me. It took us 3 months to find out. During this time, her allergic reactions became increasingly severe. Eventually, we discovered that Mary was allergic to coconut. The doctors told us it was a particularly rare allergy, so it was not on the skin test panels they performed. When we found out she was allergic, we were relieved, very relieved. You see, when I was a child, my mother used to put coconut oil in my hair all the time. It would get all greasy. I hated it. And when I was old enough to take care of my own hair, I never used that stuff again. Imagine the irony. When I found out my daughter had a severe allergy to the one thing I hated all my life. We told my mother and she laughed too, made jokes about how my baby must have heard me talking about how much I hated coconut oil while she was still cooking inside me and decided to hate it too. We all laughed and left it at that. At least that's what I thought. My mother and I always had a strained relationship. At best, we got along well enough, but we vehemently disagreed on certain issues. Regarding the upbringing of my children, my mother did not interfere. She respected all my decisions, even if she did not always like them. The only thing she continuously nagged me about was the coconut oil story. You see, my girls had very textured and curly hair. It was a bit rough, and my mother always insisted that a little oil would make the curls softer and more defined. I always said no. Now I will tell you what happened on one particular day. I was giving a test to my students that day and had to stay late on my research at the lab. My husband was at a conference and our babysitter had the flu, so I called my mother to stay with the kids during the day. My son was almost 3 years old and the girls were 1.5 years. Visits from my parents at night were not common, but they were also not uncommon. They always returned from these visits very happy and well cared for, so I did not think twice about leaving them with my parents. They talked to me on the phone after lunch. Around 5 p.m., we did a video call. The kids were happy and healthy. I got home around 10 that night, called my mother to see if the kids were still awake so I could say goodnight. I missed the kids for about 20 minutes. They had already gone to bed. Then I talked to my mother for a while, but she was also an early sleeper, so we hung up and went to sleep. I woke up around 5 the next morning to pick up my husband at the airport at 6. I picked up my husband and then we went to pick up the kids first and go to brunch with my parents. We got to my parents' house at 7. My parents were not there. My son was at the neighbor's house and ran out as soon as he saw Daddy and me arrive. He was panicked and crying, and I could not calm him down. My blood pressure was rising because I was thinking something terrible had happened to my parents. My neighbor told me she did not know what was going on, but there was an ambulance at my parents' house at 6. My father had gone over there and woke them up to see if they could take care of my son for a few hours until he got back. Of course, they said yes. I was calling my parents non-stop at this point and was getting frantic because I did not know what had happened. My son was still crying but was calmer. Still, he could not explain to me what had happened, although honestly, I do not remember the details of what happened next. Somehow, we found out that the ambulance was from a nearby hospital. We broke several traffic laws trying to get there. We got to the hospital, parked at the emergency entrance just for ambulances. We got out of the car and ran in. Some nurses noticed our distress immediately and asked us what was wrong. I was calmer than my husband at this point, so I explained that I did not know, said that my twin daughters and my parents were here somewhere. I will never forget the look on that nurse's face. She knew exactly who I was at that moment and was about to cry. Another nurse took us to an empty room. They asked us to calm down and listen to the doctor before we went to look for my family. My mother had applied coconut oil to my daughter's hair while they were playing the day before. Before bed, the girls loved when my mother did their hair, so they asked her to braid it, and my mother agreed. She put coconut oil in their hair to make the braids look nicer. According to my son, Mary started to feel a little dizzy and itchy when my mother was doing her hair. So, my mother gave her some children's Benadryl, which made her drowsy since it was almost bedtime. The children went to bed. Giving Benadryl was something we did when she had a mild reaction, as it usually meant she had had some accidental contact with coconut oil from a secondary source. We also washed her from head to toe immediately to eliminate any remaining traces. My mother simply gave her Benadryl, left the coconut oil in her hair, and put her to bed. The Benadryl made her drowsy, unable to wake up or be conscious enough to wake her brother or cry out. She vomited in her sleep, and the rash spread all over her body. Her little body swelled to twice its size, and she suffocated in her sleep. She died a slow and painful death in the early hours of the morning. My mother found her when she went to check on the children in the morning around 7 o'clock. She was already gone. At that moment, my mother screamed and called my father. That's when they went to the hospital. My father didn't know about the coconut oil until my mother explained. To this day, I have never seen my father so furious at the hospital. He couldn't look at my mother out of anger or at me out of shame. They rushed to the hospital in hopes there was some way to save Mary and to check on Lisa immediately, as he thought she might also have a mild allergy. I can't explain the feelings my husband and I had. I remember seeing my little girl and just denying the reality. It couldn't be possible that she was gone. This had to be a horrible nightmare. The following days, the funeral, explaining what happened to my other children, are events I still can't talk about. It just tears a part of me apart. My mother was investigated, as was my entire family. I almost lost my children to the equivalent of Child Protective Services in my country because they thought my children were in danger. My husband and I had to fight to show that approving this during that period would be the worst thing for them. My mother was never arrested. My father left her. However, they are not officially divorced. It's been 13 years. Brian just got his driver's license this year. Lisa is about to enter high school. Both are healthy and becoming incredible adults. I don't think I can recover from the loss of my daughter. We miss her so much.